Good afternoon. I'm Michael Poppa, Executive Director of the Mainstream Coalition, and thank you for joining us today for Mainstream Live, our series of live interviews with figures in Kansas politics, advocacy, and community building. If you'd like to learn more about how you can get involved with Mainstream and our advocacy work, visit mainstreamcoalition.org. And while you're there, please consider becoming a member or making a donation to help us continue fighting for common sense leadership in Kansas. And now, I'd like to welcome Kansas House Representative Rui Xu from District 25. Hi, Representative Xu. Thanks for joining us today.
Good.
Good. How are you?
Doing all right. I mean, just doing the best we can during this pandemic.
Right. How are you and the family holding up, especially
Good.
with an infant in the house?
Yeah. So we have a 6-month-old named Astra, and then I feel very thankful. I feel like not very many dads get this much time at home with their newborn. And so just every single day has been crazy watching her learn different things. And then it kind of gives structure to the days too, right? Just got to get from nap to nap basically to be productive.
Right. So what are you looking forward to most? I mean, you just said you get to spend a lot more time with your daughter. So you're already doing that, but what are you looking forward to most after this?
Showing her off to constituents and friends and family. I mean, we had a pediatrician appointment this morning, and that was the first other human being that she's seen in person in a month and a half. So just kind of introducing her to new things and new people again, rather than just staying at home. Because my wife's a nurse, so I am a pretty big risk of spreading it because she's at a hospital all the time. So I've just really been hunkered at home, just trying to be as safe as possible.
All right. Well, thank you to your wife for being out there and in the thick of it. We do appreciate it. So let's get to some questions about the legislature.
Yeah.
So tell me, what are your general thoughts, at the end of your first term?
It's been a weird, wonderful, beautiful ride. The legislature at the same time moves very quickly, especially as a freshman. You're just trying to learn as much as you can. The first 2 months, I probably heard drinking from a fire hose 100 times. And that's truly an apt analogy. But at the same time, government does and probably should move fairly slow, right? There are things that I care a lot about. But to really advance an issue, it takes a year, 2 years, 3 years to kind of talk to people about it and just try to advance the conversation. I do love it more than I ever thought that I would. And then I come out of it even more optimistic. I think a lot of people think it's easy to become cynical in a political system. And that can be true if you're a certain type of person. But for me, I see a lot of young people trying to enact change, and that gives me a lot of hope.
That had to have been a huge learning curve at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
what do you think was the hardest hump to get over?
I think it's just learning, kind of there's a rhythm to everything, right? There's the beginning of session where you're in committees all the time, but the deadlines hit really quickly. Like the deadline to introduce, where you're done being able to introduce bills is 3 weeks into the session. So past 3 weeks, if you were still working on an idea, it's just kind of done unless it goes through one of the exempt committees. So it's just kind of learning the rhythm and the rules to everything. And then once you kind of get past that in your first session, my second year has just kind of been getting better at it, So now I've had a year of developing relationships, especially with your committee chair. So now you get an idea. Now to go to the committee chair to ask, hey, I have this idea. Can we get a hearing on it? He might say yes, or they might say no, but it's just kind of getting better at the whole process.
Speaking of being at the State House, we were talking just a little bit briefly before we went online. What's your best guess on whether or not y'all are going back?
Yeah, so as it stands right now, so the LCC, the Legislative Coordinating Council, ruled last week that they would wait to make a decision until May 6th. But all the rumors that we've heard is that we'll likely meet for a couple of days at the mid-end of March. So somewhere in the neighborhood of March 15th through March 22nd, somewhere in that area. We'll meet for a couple of days. I'm not sure what we're going to do in those couple of days. So there were things that were on track to get passed at the end of the legislature. So obviously, personally, I'd love to see Medicaid expansion get done this year, especially as we go into a potential recession, but just in general economic strife. But we are also on track to do stuff like sports gambling, right? Like everybody's seen the revenue numbers at this point. Like it's going to be a struggle for revenue. So sports gambling is a way to kind of, cut that a little bit. And then we were maybe going to have committee hearings on, stuff like medicinal marijuana or maybe even LGBTQ non-discrimination. We probably won't get to those this session, but hopefully beginning of next session, we can kind of get back on track with those things.
And you said you think May 15th through about the 20th or 22nd? Is that what you said?
If we do reconvene, it'll likely be then. And obviously, this is all conditioned on, if the numbers continue to look good and trend in a positive direction. There are some issues. I think everybody's heard about the meatpacking plants out in Western Kansas. But, if we're able to get everything under control, it will probably meet for another couple of days.
I was muted. You mentioned Medicaid expansion. Any hope for that passing this year?
I don't know. I'm not going to say it's a 0% chance. I would say that the leadership in the Senate and the House probably are going to try not to, ultimately it's up to the will of whoever's willing to fight for it, right? Last year at the end of session, there was the big budget battle. We were trying to hold up the budget in the House so the Senate could take up Medicaid expansion, and ultimately ended up failing. But as long as we can get enough people to keep holding things up, it's possible, but it would take a lot of political will to make it happen. So I would say I am, not super optimistic that it could happen. It could, but I would say at the very least, we have to get it done. It should have gotten done 7 years ago. It should have gotten done at the beginning of this year. But, especially now going into a time of economic strife, we need to get people health care.
Do you anticipate that it'll come back again at the next legislature year?
Next 2021, you mean?
Right.
It'll come back. If we don't pass, then the Medicaid expansion is going to be, again, the main issue.
Yeah. Now your primary issue has been climate change, and you introduced a related bill earlier in this session. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened with that bill, or generally how the issue has been discussed and received in the State House?
So I've had a couple of bills introduced, actually. So the first big one, and this kind of goes back to the conversation I had at the beginning of this, was about advancing the conversation. So this was just a resolution. And so for those of you who know politics, resolutions are for the most part non-binding. But just a resolution, just acknowledging that climate change is real and that it's an emergency and that we should do something about it. And so I got, I think, 21, 22 co-sponsors on it and got it introduced. And, behind closed doors, you get people who you talk to who maybe weren't willing to co-sponsor or you think wouldn't be on the issues, be like, hey, good job with that, way to talk about it, way to bring it up. The one that got a lot of conversation actually was, especially with conservatives who I didn't really expect, it was a tax credit bill that essentially gave tax credits to farmers to implement pro-carbon sequestration policies. So basically they get essentially a kind of a tax credit based on how much carbon that they sequester into the ground rather than it floating up in the air. And so that one I kind of introduced. It was an idea that I developed and just try to walk through my first session, just kind of teach myself the process. And once I introduced it in my second session, I had some pretty conservative people come up to me and be like, hey, that's a really great idea. I'm open to it. They're farmers and they would benefit from it. But they said, if you kind of just soften the language even just a little bit, I think we could get this passed. And then so, that's kind of one of the areas where you can kind of see different coalitions forming, right? You can see, pretty conservative, but farmers who they care about the environment, but they also care about, making some extra bucks for themselves, but also seeing how that can help the environment as well.
Great. And did that see any traction? Where did that go this year?
It didn't go anywhere. So, I mean, that by and large, especially freshman Democrats, but Democrats in general, it's very rare that you'll see them get a hearing. I did get one hearing on a bill that was essentially, it kind of designated certain solar sites as pollinator friendly. So if hopefully over the next 5, 10, 20 years, we'll see a lot more solar installations come into Kansas, right? And so one of the things that's important is when these giant solar installations get installed, that we try to encourage them to do it in the least environmentally impactful way possible. So Basically, it's just creating a list of like, hey, these are the 5 things. If you do these 5 things, then you can, market yourself as pollinator friendly. So that did get a hearing. It ultimately didn't get worked, but that's again kind of the part of knowing your committee chair, kind of learning the process on how to advance conversations on stuff that you care about.
Sure. So you mentioned solar installations in pollinator-friendly areas or zones.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that for those of us that might not understand it completely?
So basically, I mean, if you imagine not like rooftop solar, but like the big solar installations that are on the ground, essentially, when builders come in and construct those, it can be pretty damaging to the land there, right? There used to be plants and flowers there. And by installing them, it's very easy just to kind of wipe out all of that and just put in your solar installations. But there are ways to install solar that are less impactful on the environment that, if you keep most of the vegetation and then, we allow the bees and the butterflies to still have those flowers there to pollinate, then it's way better. So it's just kind of a soft push to kind of encourage solar installers to be environmentally friendly rather than just do the path of least resistance.
Sure. Thank you. You mentioned earlier it was difficult for a freshman legislator or particularly a Democratic legislator to get traction on proposed legislation. And lately there's been a concerted partisan effort to across the country. And then last week, on Thursday, we saw that protest at the Capitol. So what are your thoughts on this, and how do you see us safely reopening the state?
Yeah, I lost you for a second, but I assume the question was about reopening the economy. And basically every single one of us, and this is not a partisan issue, right? All of us want to reopen the economy, right? Like all of us want to see our family and friends again. All of us want to go to happy hours again, but we have to do it in a way that's scientifically safe. I am of the personal opinion that it's actually more damaging to the economy long term if you reopen without restrictions. And then the governor has actually talked about this. This happened in the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic, that the cities that just kind of opened up willy-nilly kind of end up seeing the effects of it for far longer than the cities that did a more moderate and reasonable approach. So I think what you're going to see, especially in Kansas, is you're going to see a kind of a gradual phasing in or phasing out of restrictions based on certain metrics. And so I don't know what those benchmarks are, but basically if you hit certain benchmarks, then you can open up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. At the same time, that's happening with the state restrictions, though. You're going to see Johnson County come in with their own rules. And then again, I know they're in conversations with that probably as we speak on what that's going to look like. But we're the hardest hit part of the state, so it's likely that we're going to see harsher restrictions than the state as a whole, just because of where we're hit. So really, I think that we have to be smart about this. I know that we all have constituents and friends and family that are really struggling because of the shutdown. But I really do believe that if we do the smart thing and then kind of do this slowly, that's going to be better for the economy than just kind of opening wide up and just seeing continual spikes. Right? If we open up now, then in 2-3 weeks, we're going to see a spike. And then after that, we're going to see another spike. And then nothing can really open up fully for a really long time.
Have you heard any headway in testing in the general population?
Johnson County, we're definitely doing it. I know my wife actually just did it this morning because she's a nurse. And so we did the survey and she got picked to do the population testing. So we're doing that here. I know that we're trying to ramp up the testing capacity at the state level. The problem is, so we have plenty of testing machines, but we don't have enough testing cartridges and chemical reagents, is what Dr. Norman said. So we're actually starting to use 3D printers to print out swabs, which I think is really cool, and then trying to get enough equipment to do population testing. So they're ramping it up, I know, but I don't think we're quite where we need to be. But I think just based on the hospitalization rates, we know essentially where the hardest hit areas are going to be and where we need to watch out for.
Sure. And we were talking about the kind of lifting of restrictions in Johnson County compared to the state. And then I was reading over the outline. I have it pulled up over here. The outline that the task force presented yesterday, and it looks like there's a lot more, at least in this first iteration, recommendations rather than directives.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
So
that's what I read more to me. And then I would, like to see some strong, because the problem with us is the interaction between us and Kansas City, Missouri, right? And so between us, that's a big chunk of the central Midwest of the hospitalizations and deaths. And then personally, my wife's hospital. And then so, if whatever that we can do to really stave off the infection rates, I think we should. But, I would say contact your county commissioners, and then definitely the chairman of the county commission to let them know your thoughts, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be kind of guiding this going forward as the state looks to, because the rural areas, most of the rural areas are not getting hit as hard, right? And so it seems it can be overly onerous. I am sympathetic to that. It can be overly onerous to some of their areas to have these really strict restrictions. But, we have to take care of ourselves here in Johnson County.
Sure. It would stand to reason that the more rural areas aren't getting hit as hard because there's natural physical distancing.
Right. Yeah. Like my neighbor is like 20 feet away, whereas they're probably 20 miles between farms. That makes sense.
Right. So everyone, first, we talked many people more than others. Unemployment has been a big conversation out there. We've been hearing a lot about it. Are there any updates that you might be able to give on unemployment, access to unemployment? Yeah,
so first of all, I know a lot of you have been dealing with this. I'm sorry. I know it's been a humongous pain, the unemployment system. This is my colleague, Representative Clayton, said this in an article that, this is kind of what austerity gets you as public policy, right? If you don't invest in government, if you don't invest in IT, then when you have these kind of black swan events that really tax the system, then you're not going to have enough infrastructure to take care of it. So this has kind of been a result of decades of underfunding of IT and staffing and stuff like that. They have been working on it, so I know that they've at least tripled staff since this all started about a month and a half ago. They've kind of updated their IT system as quickly as they can. So I'm hearing fewer and fewer complaints about the website. I'm still hearing some about the phones. That's just kind of natural, but the access is a little bit better. I'm also getting lots of questions about the $600 from the federal government from the CARES Act. And so the update there, that should be coded in. You should be receiving that $600 and back pay back to, I think, late March. Either this week or next week. So that's good. That's extra income that's going to be coming in from the federal government. And then the last update that I'm getting asked the most about is about the self-employment. So the Federal CARES Act also expanded unemployment eligibility requirements, whereas before self-employed people like, hairstylists and people like that, Uber drivers, they would not be eligible for unemployment. Under the new CARES Act, they are. However, it's a brand new federal program. So it's called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA is what they call it. And so it kind of takes a little bit of time to develop a brand new program from the time it's enacted and signed into law. And then there's like the delay on the federal guidance. And then there's another delay from the state developing its its requirements to connect the systems. And so we're likely still a few weeks away from the self-employed people from being able to get benefits. But what we've been told by the Department of Labor is to go ahead and apply for unemployment benefits, get denied, and then keep filing your weekly claim so that when the programs finally do connect, then you'll receive all the money that's due to you. So we're getting there. You might start hearing stuff maybe about the federal government going back and then Congress passing more. I don't know what we're seeing there, but it's likely as we try to rebound from the economy that we'll see more from the federal government as well.
And we at Mainstream applaud Governor Kelly and everything that she has done to flatten this curve here in Kansas. I personally believe that she's been very proactive, working with other governors, with the KDHE. We talked about Medicaid expansion. We talked about some increased testing, access to unemployment. Is there anything else right now that you think the state could be doing more to ensure that Kansans are getting the help that they need?
There's a lot of things that I've been thinking about. So the governor, as part of her executive orders, has kind of ensured that landlords cannot evict people for not being able to pay rent or their mortgage as a result of COVID-19. But generally, they're allowed to pursue forbearance, which means that you don't have to pay now, but you hit a certain date and then it's all going to be due. And I think that's probably an undue burden to a lot of our renters and our mortgage payers. So I think as part of any economic reopening conversation, we kind of have to look at kind of spreading out that over a longer period of time. You can't just expect people to go without income for a couple of months and then just be able to repay their mortgages and repay all that back rent owed a little bit again. Something that I'm having a conversation with next week is kind of strengthening renters' rights. For that reason, Kansas has fairly not super renter friendly policies in place. And so I'm going to see what we can do at the state level to kind of help our renters out. Because especially in a time of recession, it would be pretty unfair just to be able to evict people, as soon as, May 4th comes around and they can't pay, hey, you got to get out of here. I don't think that's fair. One thing that I would like to commend the governor on again is she closed our schools early and then strongly, right? That was a big news story. But I think what we've seen as a result of that is that it allowed our administrators and our schools and our teachers to develop a plan. So rather than put them in limbo and be like, hey, we might come back, we might not come back, we said, no, we're not going to come back, come up with a plan and do the best we can for our kids. And so now we've had, I think, over 25 other states come to us and come to us for our plan because they kind of realized from their numbers, we're not going to be able to come back by May. So that's something that required a lot of foresight from our governor and her team, which I think is really strong. I know that there are concerns about executive powers under an emergency, but it's the most efficient way to go about. I think it's reasonable to have a certain amount of legislative oversight over that, but having strong executives and smart executives has proven really helpful.
Sure. On the topic of education, we have a question from one of our viewers. Yeah. And more of a comment, but please address university funding for opening in the fall. Or
so I will gladly leave that up to the Board of Regents on that one. I don't know what their plan is. I have not been in conversations with them about it. We did appropriate additional money, but obviously with everything up in the air, we don't know. I think just as a general comment over the next probably year or so, it's just that we're not going to know a lot. The economy and society will have changed quite a bit over this, and so new rules are going to need to apply based on infection rates and hospitalization rates. So not a ton of insight there from me, but I will try to keep you guys updated in my newsletter about what the Board of Regents says.
Speaking of keeping everyone updated, where can people go to find information? Where can they sign up for the newsletter?
So you can go to my Facebook page. So you can just look my name up, RuiXuks. And you can sign up for my newsletter there. You can go to my website, Rui Xu for Kansas, RuiXu for Kansas.com. Or you can just shoot me an email at ruixuks@gmail.com. And then I will just throw you on my list and happy to do it. I'm here to serve. These are not easy times, but it's been very meaningful to try to help guide constituents through all of this. So whatever you guys need done, let me know.
Well, I'd have to follow Representative Xu on Twitter.
Yes, my Twitter account is also great. A little bit snarkier, a little bit more comedy on the Twitter account. than Facebook or email. So pick
But
your poison on
right.
that one.
I'd have to say during, while the legislature's in session, though, I mean, you're updating constantly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely updating constantly. And then, one of the things as a freshman Democrat, I kind of joke, is that we don't get a lot of wins as freshman Democrats. And certainly like very few people are listening to freshman Democrats. So it kind of opens up the avenues to be a little snarkier and funnier than
Sure.
your average person, I think.
Sure. We have just a few minutes left, and there's a question from the audience that I wanted to get in there. Do you think that a constitutional amendment will come up again next year? So we're talking about 21. And is that still the sticking point for Medicaid expansion?
This year, I don't know that that's the sticking point as much as just literally time, right? If we reconvene on the 18th or so, then we only have 3 or 4 days to kind of fix all the budgetary issues in those couple of days. So I don't know that if we'll be able to get Medicaid expansion. For that same reason, I don't think that we'll get the constitutional amendment again this year. Next year, to a large extent, it depends on how these elections go in 2020. Before the pandemic, the projections were that the Democrats would win a couple of seats within the legislature, which would put the constitutional amendment essentially out of question. So right now, you guys might know that the numbers technically in the legislature are 84 Republicans and 41 Democrats. And they need all 84 to pass the constitutional amendment. And we've had a couple of Republicans help us out on this issue in the past. But, if we get another 5 or 6 Democrats and then another couple, 3 or 4 or 5 moderates, then that essentially puts a constitutional amendment on abortion out of the question, I think.
Great. Well, I want to thank you one more time for being here today, and really had pleasure speaking with you. And like you mentioned, if there are any questions that people have, they can contact you directly via email, Facebook page, sign up for your newsletter on your website, and we'll have that information in the chat.
Yep. All right. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Mainstream. Thanks everybody for listening. Let me know how I can help.
Of course, definitely. Take care of yourself.
Yep.
We'll
You
see
as
you
well.
soon. All right. Thanks. And then I'd also like to thank everyone else who turned out today. Please visit the Mainstream website to view upcoming events, particularly our Walk the Vote 2020. And that's going to begin the week of June 5th with a virtual celebration on June 13th. This year, because of COVID-19, we're walking for real, but in a virtual community across the state of Kansas. So for more information on that or to register, please visit walkthevote.org. Have a great rest of the day. And remember, do more than vote. Thanks.